But standard assumed people attacked from standard angles. Directly between them, where their firing arcs overlapped everywhere else, there was a narrow seam where neither slit could depress far enough without exposing itself to the other. A corridor made by geometry, not mercy. Evie watched the rhythm of fire. Left gun, 3-second burst, pause. Right gun, 2-second burst, pause. She waited for the moment both paused at once, the half-breath of silence where gunners checked barrels, shifted belts, blinked sweat from their eyes. Then she ran. Not a sprint you save energy for. A full-blooded, reckless charge that used speed as armor. Coral ripped at her boots. The bar bounced against her hip. The corridor funneled her straight, no room to weave. A single misstep meant catching a burst from either side. She crossed it in under a second. The third bunker's slit flashed as defenders tried to swing on her, but they were too late. She was already at the wall, already in the blind edge beside the aperture. Evie jammed the bar's muzzle into the slit and fired until the weapon bucked empty. She heard the change inside, the muffled impact of rounds on flesh, the metal clank of a gun dropping, voices turning into panic. She pulled a fragmentation grenade, counted to 2, shoved it through. Then she moved, without waiting to hear the explosion, because the fourth bunker was already trying to solve the same problem, how to kill the American who shouldn't exist in their blind zone. Evie ran across the tiny open gap between bunkers, like she was stepping between two snapping jaws. The fourth slit spat a burst that cut Coral inches above her shoulder. She hit the wall, pressed flat, and repeated the sequence. Muzzle into the slit, short controlled bursts, then a grenade timed just enough to detonate inside. The blast thumped through concrete, smoke breathed out of the slit, silence followed. 4 pillboxes down. The whole action had taken minutes, but her body read it as one long second stretched tight. Her forearms burned from holding the bar. The barrel was hot enough to cook meat. She smelled oil, dust, and the sweet sour stink of burned powder. Behind her, Marines were moving now, real movement, not crawling. Evie saw it in flashes, helmets bobbing forward, men rising and dropping into new cover, a sergeant pointing and shouting orders that sounded like a prayer with teeth. Her assault wasn't just killing bunkers, it was changing the shape of the battlefield, and the island punished change. The fifth pillbox sat slightly back from the line, larger than the last two, but not the massive one she'd blown apart. Its concrete walls were thick and clean, its firing slit was narrow, its position looked smarter. It had something the others didn't, a rear exit. Evie didn't know that yet. She approached the way she'd learned. Read the ground, find the dead angle, close fast, deny the gunner time. She reached the wall, pressed her shoulder to concrete, and prepared to climb for the ventilation shaft. When the ground behind her opened like a trapdoor, a Japanese soldier erupted from a camouflaged tunnel mouth 5 yards back. Rifle with bayonet fixed, the blade already aimed at her spine. Evie heard him, not footsteps, but the scrape of stone on stone, the desperate inhale of a man lunging. She spun, fired from the hip. The bar's .30 caliber rounds slammed into his chest and snapped him backward into the tunnel like a puppet whose strings were cut. He fell half in, half out, bayonet clattering on Coral, but the noise had done its work. Inside the bunker, men shouted, boots pounded, something heavy scraped, a machine gun shifting position. Evie dropped to one knee and fired into the tunnel entrance. The passage became a bullet chute. Any reinforcements trying to surge out met a wall of lead. A body jerked in the dark, then another. She burned through a full magazine in seconds, reloaded, and kept firing until the tunnel went still. The fifth bunker fell silent, not because she'd cleared it cleanly, but because she'd strangled its rear exit and made movement inside impossible. 5 down, 7 remaining, and now the Japanese understood. They weren't dealing with a squad, they weren't dealing with a coordinated assault, they were dealing with one figure moving through the seams of their fortress, killing positions in sequence, breaking doctrine by refusing to behave like a normal target. Nakagawa's men had radios, they had runners, they had a network inside those tunnels, and the message moving through the system was simple. One American is collapsing the southern perimeter. Concentrate fire, kill her. Evie didn't know the message. She only felt the response. The air sharpened, more bullets started searching for her specifically. Not random fire, not area suppression, intentional bursts, tracking her movement between coral humps. The sixth pillbox sat on elevated ground, a ridge 15 feet higher than the surrounding terrain. It had visibility, it had angles. It had time, no sneaking, no blind crawl. Just open approach under a firing slit that could see everything. Evie counted her ammunition. 1 magazine in the bar, 20 rounds. She swallowed dry air and tasted sand. Then to her right, movement. 6 Marines in a loose line, a rifle squad pushing through the gap she'd carved. Their sergeant saw her behind a coral boulder, saw the elevated bunker, saw the geometry that didn't allow a single attacker to close. He didn't shout a plan, he just pointed and led his men forward. 2 threats now, 2 approaches. The Japanese gunners chose the larger group. They pivoted their guns toward the squad, trying to cut down the obvious danger. That was the only opening Evie needed. She ran the ridge's blind side, climbed broken coral like a ladder of knives, and found the ventilation shaft. She shoved the bar muzzle into it, fired 10 rounds, paused, fired 10 more. Every shot mattered, not for glory, because she would be empty after this, and empty weapons on Peleliu were death certificates. The 6th bunker went silent. The rifle squad paid for it. A man fell hard and didn't get up. Another crawled back with blood on his forearm like paint. But they were alive and forward. They were part of the fight now. Evie looked down at her bar, empty. For the first time since she stood up and ran, her momentum hit a wall. She needed magazines, grenades, anything. She dropped beside the ridge and began scavenging. Japanese rifles were useless to her, wrong ammunition, but their grenades weren't. She collected Type 97 fragmentation grenades from bodies and from pouches ripped open by shrapnel. She found 2 magnetic mines meant for tanks, heavy, awkward, but explosive. She found an M1 Garand lying near the 3rd bunker. The rifle was next to a Marine who no longer had a name, only a stain. The Garand used the same 30 caliber rounds. Evie stripped the clips, one by one, and hand-loaded rounds into her empty bar magazines. Slow, brutal, the kind of work that felt ridiculous with bullets flying, but it was the only way to make the math work again. 2 full magazines, 40 rounds, enough to keep moving. The rifle squad reorganized. Their sergeant had been hit, shoulder wound, still giving orders with hand signals, like a man refusing to be written out of the story. 3 of his Marines were still combat effective. Evie and the 3 men started toward the 7th pillbox. Then the Japanese counterattack hit. It came out of the tunnels 200 yards north, 40 soldiers, moving in disciplined columns. No screaming, no charge. Just infantry advancing through coral ridges with rifles ready, heads low, spacing tight enough to support each other. The Marines saw them first. A bar opened up from the squad, 3 rounds, then jammed with coral dust in the mechanism. The gunner cursed and dropped into cover, working the bolt. Evie stepped into the gap. She braced her bar against coral and fired controlled bursts. 5 rounds, pause, 5 rounds, pause. Like she was rationing seconds of life. The Japanese formation scattered into cover, but more kept pushing forward. Their return fire cracked overhead and chipped coral into her face. The 3 Marines added their Garands, 8-round clips, aimed fire. The ping of empty clips ejecting punctuated the chaos like a bell tolling. Japanese soldiers fell, 10, 15, but numbers kept coming. Orders kept pushing them forward. Evie's first magazine ran dry. She reloaded her last 20 rounds. The Marines were down to final clips. The jammed bar finally cleared, but it had only 1 magazine left. The math turned ugly again. 4 Americans, maybe 60 rounds between them, 25 Japanese still moving. Then the ridge behind the Japanese erupted in explosions, not artillery, grenades, rifle fire, shouts. A larger Marine force had pushed through the gaps Evie created. 3 rifle platoons, 40 men, had circled behind the counterattack. They'd waited until the Japanese were committed. Now they closed the trap. Crossfire ripped through the coral. Japanese soldiers dropped in clusters. Those who tried to retreat to the tunnel mouth were cut down before they reached it. In under 3 minutes, the counterattack ended. 40 bodies on the coral. The last reserve was gone. And suddenly, Evie wasn't alone anymore. She had ammunition now. Grenades. Marines willing to follow her because they'd seen concrete fall. 6 pillboxes remained. Ahead, 3 of them formed the final strongpoint on the southern peninsula. A triangle arrangement, mutually supporting, heavily manned. 30 soldiers divided among them, plus rifle pits connecting the positions like stitching. Doctrine said bombard first, naval gunfire, mortars, air support, none of it was available. So Evie did something simple. She organized 2 minutes, hand signals, pointing, 3 groups. Each group would hit 1 bunker at the same time. Evie would take the center bunker, the one with the best fields of fire. They moved at 8:47. The temperature climbed past 105 degrees. Men were dehydrating, salt crusting on their faces. Some shook with heat exhaustion. They moved anyway. The approach to the center bunker was 60 yards of open ground. No cover, no concealment, just baked coral and the knowledge that a gun slit was watching. The Japanese opened fire halfway across. 2 Marines fell in the first 3 seconds, one dead, one wounded and screaming, dragging a leg that didn't drag right. The rest didn't stop. They'd learned the only rule Peleliu respected: speed is survival. Evie hit the bunker wall and pulled the pin on a Japanese grenade. Type 97, short fuse. She counted to 2, threw it through the slit, ducked. The explosion silenced one gun, but another kept firing from a second aperture. Marines outside were dying. Evie pulled another grenade, counted, threw. The second gun went quiet. She climbed to the roof, found the ventilation shaft, and emptied her magazine into the darkness below until the bunker stopped being a place with people in it and became a concrete box full of silence. On her left, another group collapsed half a bunker roof with a satchel charge. Survivors stumbled into Marine rifle fire. On her right, the third group stalled, defenders throwing grenades faster than the Marines could close. Evie didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the open gap between bunkers under flanking fire. Bullets kicked coral around her feet. One grazed her thigh. Hot, sharp, a line of pain that didn't feel like much until blood started soaking fabric. She reached the third bunker's blind side, found the ventilation shaft, and dropped 2 grenades in quick sequence. 2 muffled blasts, then silence. The triangle fell in under 4 minutes. Evie stood, breathing hard, legs stinging, eyes squinting through smoke. 3 more pillboxes remained between the Marines and full control of the southern peninsula. The logical thing was to stop. Get a courseman. Let someone else finish. Evie reloaded her last magazine and started south. The 10th pillbox fell first. 5 defenders killed by grenades dropped through the vent. The 11th required help. A Marine brought up a satchel charge and Evie placed it under covering fire. 7 more defenders erased in one concussive breath. Then the 12th. It sat on a small rise overlooking the beach. Its machine guns had been murdering supply parties since D-Day. Its commander had watched 11 bunkers die. He knew the shape of the end. Evie's leg was failing now, not broken, just losing strength as blood seeped and heat chewed at her vision. The coral shimmered like water in the sun. 3 Marines refused to let her go alone. One carried extra grenades, one carried a flamethrower, one carried a bar with ammunition to spare. The Japanese opened fire at 100 yards. The supporting bar answered with suppressive bursts, forcing the gunners to duck. Evie and the others kept moving. At 50 yards, the flamethrower operator stepped forward. The M2's effective range was 40 yards. He needed 10 more. Evie took the supporting bar, dropped to one knee when her wounded leg buckled, and fired controlled bursts into the slit, just enough to keep the gunners' heads down. The flamethrower reached range. He squeezed the trigger. A 3-second burst of burning fuel arced into the slit and poured inside like liquid fire. The screaming lasted less than 10 seconds. At 09:33, the last pillbox fell silent. Evie collapsed against a coral boulder, dungarees soaked dark with blood, hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. The bar lay across her lap, barrel still hot, still breathing faint heat into the air. In roughly 90 minutes, she had helped destroy 12 fortified positions and broken the southern defensive line. Not by being invincible, by moving through the angles no one else could, by refusing to wait for a solution that didn't exist. A Navy corpsman reached her and cut the fabric away. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or artery. She would keep the leg. She would also keep the memory. Men would call it heroism. Evie would remember it as math, heat, and the sound of bullets turning coral into dust inches from her boots. And behind all of it, the simplest truth of Peleliu. Sometimes the only way forward is the thing that should be impossible.